All right, so folks, let's start. Okay, just a minute. All right, so today we'll study how to implement locks. Okay, all right, and the contents of this presentation I have taken from this book. It's called OS. The book in general, is known with the name OSTEP, OSTEP. Okay, operating system 3GP. So this is available online, free. It's not. It's published by author on web. And it's a beautiful book. It contains a lot of C programs, so it is easy to understand what was just right. So please go through it. For this talk, lock, and maybe next few talks, we'll use this book. All right. If you simply click on this one, you will get. Okay, and the chapter that we'll discuss today, if you click on this link, you'll get that chapter on thread semaphores, etc. Like basically locks. Okay, so this is where we are. Okay, we have seen that when we have concurrent threads or processes, then we need two important things. First is IPC, inter-process communication or inter-thread communication, and secondly is synchronization between them. So we are now studying synchronization. The last class we started with basic concepts of locks. Okay, the first we discuss about need for synchronization, and we have taken an example, and then we have seen that even although in C code thread program looks perfect, but when these threads run concurrently, and we have seen because each higher level instruction in C is not actually one instruction, but it's actually is created using multiple machine level instructions, and when they get intermixed, then there is a problem. There might be a problem, and in most of the cases, if it's not done carefully, then program gives the wrong result. Okay, and then we have also looked about a very simple lock called mutex. Okay, now mutex is a name given in Linux, and but it can be any name of the lock, but because we are using library, then when the call will use word mutex, but inside variable, actually name of the lock could be anything. All right. Okay, so we have completed this part. Today we'll see how to implement locks. Okay, and then we'll move into tomorrow we'll study condition variables, and on Tuesday we'll study semaphores. Okay, so this will end our discussion about process and threads, and we'll move on to other topics. All right, so same diagram that we have looked at last time. So what the user programs use, user programs use here, these are program use APIs provided by library or the OS, and there are various mechanisms available, and different OSs do provide different mechanisms, and their calls are also different. Okay, but in general these are locks, then semaphores, monitors, and many others, right? So we will we have yesterday looked at lock, and then we will study later semaphores. And now when we looked at locks, then we have looked only at the high level, right? We know that if the instruction is lock, then it will do certain things, but how will it do? Now we are going into lower level, OS level, right? So basically in this course we are moving both at user level, and we are discussing both user level as well as OS level. So please remember that sometimes we talk of user level, then you have to be very clear what something that's user level you can use in a program. Okay, and or if it's part of library. Okay, that runs at user level. Okay, but all this, okay, and then but these implementations require some things, right? Once we say lock, and so inside is say mutex or something, name of the lock. Okay, that you can use at higher level, but how is this going to be implemented in OS is something that we'll discuss today. We'll look at only few methods. First is by disabling interrupt. Second is test and set. Third is compare and swap. Now note that for this we take help of hardware and OS. Without help of hardware, you cannot do all this, right? So it means that like whatever the processor, whether RISC-V or is a ARM processor or Intel, it must provide few instructions, okay, or it must facilitate something, okay, such that these locks can be implemented. All right, so we'll look at the need for this and how these are implemented today. All right, okay, so these are the contents for today's class. All right, so last class we have discussed that any thread that wants to enter a critical section has to acquire lock, and when the thread comes out of critical section, it's responsibility of thread to release the lock. Okay, so it's called setting the lock or locking the lock or unlocking the lock or releasing the lock. Okay, making it free. All right. Okay, and when the lock is in locked state, it means that one thread is actually inside critical section, and if the other thread tries to lock it, then it will be blocked from locking it, right? All right, so only when this thread releases, then second thread will be able to acquire the lock. It means that now this mechanisms implements mutual exclusion, means only one thread can be in the critical section. All right, so this is what we discussed. Same thing is that we discussed yesterday, is that if like if there is a shared variable across multiple threads which is balance, and in last example that we have seen, it was a count. We are making count is equal to count plus 1. That was shared variable. Okay, then since this is not atomic, okay, this is not an atomic operation because this will split into multiple assembly language instructions or machine level instructions, right? So this and that causes a problem. Okay, hence it has to be put inside a mutex. That's what we have done yesterday. The counter value count is equal to count plus 1 was put inside a mutex. We will lock this section, okay, and unlock it, right? So this is locking and locking. So this is basically put between locking this. It means creating this critical section, and then it will unlock. So lock is actually a variable. Like mutex is nothing but a variable, the one which is shown here. Instead of name mutex, you can use your own name also if you want. Okay. All right, and then if there is a critical section, then there is correspondingly a lock. Okay, and then all the threads must use this lock if they want to use this critical section. It's very obvious, but that doesn't mean there can't be, in a system there can't be many locks. I mean, it's left to you to define any number of locks you want for different purposes. Okay, and then you have to use appropriate programming such that the appropriate threads use those locks. Okay, all right, okay. And then we have looked at these primitives, lock and unlock. All right, this we have discussed. So, all right, and these were the lock calls, pthread lock calls, pthread libraries calls, POSIX libraries calls, right? So we have used init call, we have used lock call, Then we have used unlock call. Of course, we have not used destroy call, which you can use, but there is something also here is called try lock. Okay, which is try to lock a mutex and acquire it. If the lock is available or unlocked state, then acquire it. Otherwise, just don't block yourself, right? And then if it's not available. Okay, it means that, see, when we say, if the lock is in locked state and thread tries to acquire it, then it waits there. It doesn't come out of the routine. Okay, all right. So here it says that just come out of routine. It means that now don't waste the whole slot just doing the same thing, checking every time again and again. All right. Okay, so now we look at this aspect in more detail. So when we acquire, once we implement lock, we'll have to look at following things. First thing is that is it efficient lock? Locking can be done, but is it really efficient? What is the cost of creating this lock, right? Is it going to take a lot of steps, a lot of time? Okay. And second thing is what hardware support it requires. Note that it's very, very hard to create lock only in software. Without help of processor, efficient lock mechanism cannot be created. And then third thing is what OS support is required. So these are the three important questions one has to ask. Okay, and what is needed out of lock? Mutual exclusion. These are the desirable properties, right? Of course, we can see efficiencies and performance anyway come here as well. Second is the fairness. If multiple threads are trying to acquire a lock, then is it really fair in giving offering locks to everyone? Okay, so now this is extremely hard to achieve. Okay, third is of course performance at low overheads. And acquiring, releasing, and waiting locks should not consume many resources. Okay, and these locks are needed both at user space as well as at kernel space, because the kernel itself is nothing but processes and threads, right? So the locks are also needed at that level. Okay, all right. Now, first thing is very simple solution is that disable interrupts. What do we mean by that? When we say lock, when a thread execute this instruction lock, then OS can, it means that whatever instruction will follow in the critical section, that execution should be over, only one thread will be allowed to enter. Okay, only one thread should execute that at that point in time. And when the thread comes out, other thread. How can you enable this? Very simple thing is that disable interrupts at that time, because there won't be context switching. Okay, and then thread execution completes. Then as soon as when it runs unlock, then you enable interrupt. So first disable and then enable, as is shown here. Okay, this approach is very simple. Okay, but is it good enough? No. Because disabling interrupt is not a great solution, because there, first thing is there might be a very important interrupt that may come at that point in time. Power failure, for example, or something else, higher priority interrupts, right? Then those interrupts will not be allowed. That's one big problem. Second big problem is that are we not giving enough power in the hands of user to play with interrupts? It means that now user will have some kind of control to disable interrupt. Okay, and then what happens now that threads keeps running for longer period of time? Okay, so these are the problems, and it may not work easily on multiprocessor system, because each processor will have own set of interrupts. Okay, then disabling interrupt in all processors is not a good idea because it will reduce the performance to very low. Okay. All right. Any question? Note that interrupt is very important aspect, right? Very important part, right? I mean, we have seen that within, in order to just do read from hard disk, overall number of interrupts required could be very large, 20, 30, 40, or even more than that, right? So interrupts are very important. And whenever there is a packet transfer, IP packet comes and then comes to Ethernet, and Ethernet frame is to be transferred, received, transferred, again, there is an interrupt. Okay, so interrupt is very, very important part. For context switching is kind of interrupt that happens, right? So interrupt is very important part. So users should not be allowed to play with interrupts. There's a message. Okay. All right. So all these points we have discussed, and this approach is very inefficient. Okay. All right. Now, so it means that now we have to think of some other mechanism, right? Using interrupt or masking interrupt, or interrupt masking is a commonly known, can be done sometimes in OS. Okay, so there's one point here which says that OS can use this for their own internal purposes. Okay, so interrupt masking can be done by kernel. Okay, to guarantee atomicity for instruction which is using for itself, and very rarely. Okay, because there is no trust issue inside OS. OS is trusted party, hence it can be used. But so that's the only way. So don't allow user to use interrupts. Okay, now with that knowledge, let's look. It means that now we have to implement it differently. Okay, now look at this code. Okay, and then you have to tell me whether this works or not. So what are we doing? It first we are defining a lock. Now, like lock can be a shared variable. It's a variable, right? It's shared variable. It means that it's a location in memory. That's it. Okay. Now here, the way here they describe this as a structure, and within that structure there is one element. And this is a structure of one element. Is a flag, and that defines the lock. Okay. So now you can initialize it by setting it to 0. Now this is a pointer. Basically when you use a pointer to structure and then element you want to access, you can directly use this notation. Okay, mutex and this symbol arrow and flag is 0. Basically we are where mutex is this is pointer. So basically we're setting flag to 0. That's the semantics. Okay, where flag is defined inside a structure. All right. So flag is 0. So initial value of the flag is 0. Now let's look at the lock mechanism. So here again the mutex, name of the lock is mutex or pointer to structure. And so now we are checking here whether that flag is equal to 1. Okay, then do nothing. It means that if the lock is already acquired by some other thread, then keep running this loop until this condition, keep running this till the value of the lock is 1, and when it becomes 0 it can enter the critical section. Okay, and at the same time set the lock as 1. Okay, we are setting the lock as 1 mainly because it means that it has come out of it, or initially mutex value is 0, thread entered it, it will not it will immediately come out of this loop and set the thread is equal to the flag is equal to 1, and then now flag is set, then it can use a critical section. Unlock is just setting the flag is equal to 0. Okay, any question? This is just implementation detail, nothing more than that. Are you able to understand it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now the question I'm asking is that, so this is the explanation, right? The first thread enters critical section. It calls, in order to enter critical section, calls lock. It tests if flag is 0, and the flag actually flag is it checks whether flag is 1. Actually flag is 0. So then it enters critical section and sets up the flag is equal to 1. Now thread 1 holds the flag. When it finishes, it unlocks. If another thread calls lock at this point in time when this is holding, okay, when this thread 1 is in critical section, then it spin waits. It means that it's in loop and continuously tries, checks, for it to become 0. Okay, so there's a while loop that's running. Okay, there might be context switches in between also, right? But the while loop will continue. Okay, let's assume that thread which holds the lock moves out, is fine. Thread 2, which is in the while loop, because lock is 1, will continue to run. And then when earlier thread again is brought back, it completes and it releases the lock. Only then second thread can enter the critical section. So now the question I am asking you is that will this work? Yes or no? What we have done differently than earlier example, where counter is equal to counter plus 1. Anyone? Just think about it. Okay, it will not work. The reason is the follow. Look at this sequence, right? First thread calls lock while and checks whether flag, so initially is 0, flag is 0. It checks whether flag is 1, okay, and finds out it's not 1. At this point in time, it is interrupted, and then it context switch. The second thread comes into picture. Now flag is still 0. Note, we have not set the flag, but we have just checked the flag here. The thread 1 has just checked the flag. So its second thread comes into play. It also tries lock. It also finds flag is equal to 0. Then sets flag is equal to 1. Now flag is 1, right? Now it means that this thread can enter critical section. Okay, and then interrupt happens and it moves to thread 1. On thread 1, at this point and before interrupt, knew that flag is equal to 0. So now it also sets flag is equal to 1. And it also enters critical section. Now it means there are two threads, T1, T2, both enter the critical section. So it's wrong, right? So there's a problem. And second problem is that spin waiting is not really nice thing. It means that let's assume there are 100 threads. So 99 threads, only one thread is in critical section. 99 threads will use the whole time allocated to it. That's context switch. After context switching, whenever thread is moved, so there must be some time scheduler is given. All that time is just checking whether flag is 0 or lock is in free state. Okay, and it's not really a nice thing, right? So in order to solve these problems, we have different implementation. And first is that test and set. Second is compare and swap. So we look, and there are others also, right? Fetch and load linked and store conditional. So we'll not go into these two. We'll look at only the first two. Okay, any question up to this point? All right. Okay, now let's look at, so we have seen that, even in this example, we need to do certain things atomically. Otherwise, intermixing will cause problem. So what we have done here, the wrong results happened because of reading something and then setting that. We are checking the value of flag or log, checking the value of flag and then setting it, or checking the value of log and then setting it. This is, if you split this two, if these are independent instructions, then context switch happens, then is the same problem as we have seen in case of counter is equal to counter plus one. Okay, so now this should be made single atomic. Okay, in order to do that, the first one is test and set. Okay, because it's hard to ensure atomicity in software. So most modern architectures provide this instruction called test and set. So what it does is it tests the old value of the flag or log, and then it simultaneously sets it to new value. Now when we say variable, it's basically a variable. Okay, when we say log or whatever, and mutex or whatever, okay, is nothing but a variable. It's in memory. So what it will do is that whatever be the old value, it will read this, okay, and return this as a function. So the log is a function or routine, and inside mutex some variable. Where is it? So this location, and it will read what is the value here. Let's assume that it's a 1. Then this log will return value 1, okay, and set this to new value that's defined in this instruction. Okay, so normally new value is also 1, so it will set it to 1. So initially let's say them is a 0. Okay, so when you call this function log mutex and this value is 0, it will return the value 0 and then set this value of this memory location, which is corresponds to variable mutex, as 1. And this is done atomically. Basically, what is done atomically, if you go back to your computer architecture course, reading from memory. Okay, note that reading from memory alone is it requires a lot of steps, right? We have implemented read instruction, right? Load instruction. So reading from memory and then testing it. Okay, that testing we'll see. Okay, and then setting a new value into it. Is all these operations are done atomically. It means that all three operations done as a unit. Okay, now the hardware provides this functionality. Okay, all right, so let's implement this. Any question up to this point? Are you able to understand it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, visualize it. Without visualization in OS course, it's very difficult to understand, right? Just visualize it, what exactly is happening, and create analogy in your mind. Okay, all right. So what we are doing here, now we are defining an instruction called test and set. Note that this test and set is run by OS. You don't have access to test and set as a user program. Okay. So basically system, once you have system call, and internally it will run this. So test and set will do the following. It will, this is the old value and this is a new value. Okay. All right. So now what are we doing? This is a pointer to old value, or consider this old value. So, so first you save the old value because you have to return this old value, this value. Okay, so use this pointer and then save it into local variable old. Okay, and then set this pointer or this lock value. Okay, first we have saved, and then now we are putting it the new value that comes from this call. So now we're setting it to new. Okay, that's all. Okay, but here we have not done the test part. Whatever be the value there, just move it out as return value and then put into that a new value. Okay, now let's look at. So the sequence of operation is performed atomically. All this is atomic. Now let's see how it works. Okay, first you define lock here. Now using a structure we have defined. So this structure with only one element called flag. So we can pass the pointer of this. So this all right. So and then for initialize this lock to 0, it means that this value of flag, which corresponds to a memory location, becomes 0. Okay, so this is initialization. Now when you are locking it, what we are doing, while test and set, and then this flag and new value is 1 equal to 1, then do nothing, spin wait or keep running this loop. Else if the value is 0, it means lock is available, then it comes out of the lock function and then it can go into critical section. And unlock is similar. So what are we doing here now? First thing is that we are reading the value of flag. Okay, and then we are comparing it, and then of course we can set the value of that flag or lock as new value. Okay, and third, and what we are doing is that passing the old value as a return of the function. All right, and then also we are testing this with certain value. The value of flag, value of flag, we are testing it. Now how we are testing it? Because the return value of this function is the old value. So we are testing the old value. Okay, because it's returning. So while when this instruction is executed, the old value comes out of it, and then we're checking it with 1. It means that now we are doing many functions here, and all these are done atomically. All of them are done. So let's assume that if this is hardware provides this functionality. Okay. All right. Any question? So here actually atomic instruction, if you see, atomicity is coming because of checking and setting. That's it. Okay, basically reading the value and setting the new value. Okay. All right. So now you can look at two cases. First is flag is 0, initial flag, and then thread 1 calls lock. Then internally the first instruction here is executed. Test and set flag, and then this new value is 1. So since old value is 0, then it atomically sets flag to 1. Okay, and thread immediately enters the critical section. Now note that all these operations are atomic. Okay, and when it so new value is set, and then thread finishes, it calls unlock and sets the flag to 0. Case 2 is that when thread 1 is holding the lock, second thread calls lock, then it runs test and set, and the test and set returns the old value of flag, which is 1. Then it simultaneously sets it to again 1. Okay, and then it runs this loop. It's in while loop, because the value is 1. It means that lock is engaged. Lock is in locked state, so it does not come out of this function, and that we call as spin locking, spin locks. Okay, any question?
Sir, in the previous example, we said that spin locks take up processor like
Yeah,
memory, right? So won't this also do the same, like
yes,
use
this
up?
will also. This has not solved the problem of spin locking. There are other solutions that we'll study in the next class, which is condition variable and then semaphore, where we use this concept of, whenever thread exits, it notifies, and then one thread that is, then it means that now threads can try. Okay, so there is explicit notification that can go rather than spin locking. Okay, so the threads, if a thread finds the other thread wants to enter and lock is in locked state, then it will not continue trying forever. It will go into some sleep state. I'm just giving you a very high level. And then when this thread which was in critical comes out, it will send a signal. And then threads can again try. Okay. So there can be many variations of that. You can say that all the threads which are actually waiting for lock can be in a queue. So there are many solutions available, right? So we'll look at least one of them. So the problem is that, is it correct? Yes. Is it fair? How do you know it's fair, right? I mean, there is a possibility that, one, thread will never, if thread that is blocked will never get a chance because there are multiple threads that are trying. Okay. So nobody guarantees that every thread will get a chance. Okay, and there can be starvation. A thread may never get it. It's just because the probability of not getting, some probability. Okay, and then performance, of course, is a poor performance. Because if one thread is holding the lock and preempted, so one thread has entered critical section, while running critical section is preempted or context switched out. So all other threads are still waiting for lock. And suppose second thread now is put into, is a scheduler schedules this, then this thread will continue to do spin waiting, right? And so on. The next thread comes, that's also a spin waiting. So it's a waste of resources. While if you use multiprocessor case, is slightly better performance. Because your other threads will get a chance to, in the some sense that you can use multiple threads on multiple processors. Okay, and possibly the thread can get chance to do something else or something like that. Well, it's not defined very well, but if there is single CPU, then of course performance is going to be really bad. Okay, any question? Okay, all right. Now let's look at another example, another method which is called compare and swap. Okay, it's exactly similar, excepting that you are, where here we are doing this operation, right? Testing operation. Okay, that test operation is a part of instruction. Okay, so to test whether value at address specified by pointer, which is nothing but lock value or lock variable value, is equal to the expected one. If so, if it is this case, then update the memory location with the new value. Okay, else do nothing. Okay, so it's very similar to test and set. So only thing is the structure is different. So it will read something like this: compare and swap. So compare and swap, this is the lock value. Pointer is pointing to the old lock value and is same as the expected one. Then set the new value. All right. So original is old value, or original value is pointed out by this pointer. And if your original is expected, set this to no value. Okay. So now we can use this instruction to create lock. So, all right. So now, okay. So now again here again we'll have to use comparison. So we'll say compare and swap. If the value old value is equal to expected value, set it to 1. And if it is, it's if the old value that's returned, okay, okay, if return is already locked, then spin. So it's very similar to earlier one. So it's like this: compare and swap lock if the old value or the original value is same as, so initially lock is 0, it will unlock state. If it is 0, then set it to 1 is a locked state, and then this will not be true because 0 is not equal to 1. So it will come out of this loop and then can enter critical section. Otherwise, spin wait. So basically the semantics is the same. Syntax here is slightly different because compare and swap may be proposed by different hardware manufacturer or processor manufacturer. Okay. All right. Any question? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So let's move to next one. Now we can improve performance of this, right? So what happens if the thread, one thread is in critical section, say T1, T2 finds that it's blocked or cannot enter critical section, lock is taken by somebody, then why not T2 can yield? Now we have studied yield instruction, right? Means that give up. Okay, so it will, so basically if we have running queue and ready queue, so if it does not yield, okay, then it's continuously run while loop, right? And continuously checks. Okay, when condition becomes true, so it remains in state of that process or thread remains running. Okay, so yielding, it means that now when the slot is given, time slot, okay, so earlier case it will continue running and keeps checking in the while loop for the whole period of this slot. Now what will happen is that if this thread knows, as soon as this thread is scheduled, it knows that it's a blocked, lock is taken by somebody, immediately it will run yield instruction. Now it comes out of, it means voluntary gives up the time slot to somebody else, or a part of the time slot can be used by somebody else, some other thread can be scheduled. So it will not use the whole time period to check a thread is becoming free. Okay, so it means now it's so within this time slot period, it moves away from running to ready state. Now it can be rescheduled if scheduler schedules it, right? Okay, so this program you can see is doing exactly the same thing. If this condition is met, is the flag is that it reads is 1, okay, it means that now instead of spin waiting, it will yield. It gives up the CPU. All right, simple. So now let's compare. So spin lock is something that we studied in case of test and set and compare and swap. Okay, so let's assume there are 100 threads and they are contending for a lock, right? So in case of spin lock, whenever, because say let's assume one thread T1 has acquired lock, it uses the whole time period and moves out. So it's still holding the lock. Now in the next time slot, T2 comes into picture. Whole period will waste in doing the while loop and spin locking. T3 comes into picture, do the same thing, and T99 come into picture, or T100 comes into picture, or it gets the CPU, it will exactly waste the time. While in case of sleeping mutex, as soon as T2 finds out that the lock is not available, it will execute yield instruction and comes out of it. Now this slot can be allocated to somebody. Let's assume it gets allocated to T3. T3 will do the same thing and so on. So basically wastage is less. All right. Okay. So it will improve the efficiency, although context switch is expensive, but the starvation problem can still exist. So it does not solve the starvation problem. Because a thread, for example, we are assumed T1, T3, there's no possibility, there's very less chances that they will execute it in order. Okay, so it is a scheduler that can schedule any thread. Okay, all right. So there are various ways of improving this, and one is of course using queues. Okay, all right. So we can keep queue to keep track which threads are waiting to acquire the lock. So it happens in Solaris OS, and schedule. So basically, what are we doing here? Look at it this way. Okay, all these threads. Okay, if we put them in a queue. Okay, so let's T2, T3, T4, T5, and even if they are scheduled, then they will waste time because context switch will be there, and then it will run and then use the whole period in case of first case, and second case it will yield, right? So it will take some time. So instead of that, the solution is that one solution they have used is that scheduler is little more intelligent. It knows that these threads are waiting for lock. Okay, and lock is not available. Then schedules other thread, say Tn, which does not use lock. Then, overall CPU utilization will be higher. So this is the way, one way which Solaris does. And you can think of many new ideas, that good number of ideas are available how to do scheduling in such a case when there is a lock. On the other hand, if you do this scheme, then it's also unfair to the processes, threads that are waiting, because the chance of acquiring lock will be less and less. So scheduler has to take into account a lot of things. Okay. All right. So another few minutes. How should lock be used? Okay. First thing, a lock should be acquired before accessing any variable or data structure that is shared between multiple threads. So basically, thread safe data structures we should use. Second is that how much part of the code you want to lock, or basically question is that how big can be critical section. Is it going to be few instructions or hundreds of instructions or thousands of instructions? So there is two ways of doing is coarse grain lock, one big lock for all shared data structures. Okay, and it's easy to manage. And second is fine grained locking, is that create separate locks. If there are multiple variables and multiple shared states. For each one of them, you can create a separate log. So separate logs are difficult to manage, but it offers more parallelism. Okay, all right. So at the end, the bottom line is that it's you or the programmer who has to use this facilities given, like locking, unlocking, or whatever methods given to you as part of pthread library or APIs or system call in appropriate manner. Okay, any question? No?
Sir, I have a little doubt about.
Mm-hmm.
You were telling that when the process yields in these functions,
Mm-hmm.
it will be out of the means it won't take the space. And how will it know that now is the time that I have to try again to apply for the lock?
You know, it is not that thread can decide. There's no intelligence in thread. How can it decide? It's just code, plain simple code. It's running set of instructions. As simple as you're not adding 100 numbers. Where is the intelligence in thread?
So, but in
There's no intelligence, right? All
yeah,
it can do is yield. It says it's not able to enter your critical section, yield. That's it. Now
but
everything else is left to scheduler
okay,
or OS to create some data structures, right, or some methodology when something can be scheduled. And that's the reason
but
it's a
it
big
proceed.
optimization. Scheduling in general in processor is a huge research topic. At least more than few thousands PhD would have been done on this topic, if not more. At least I know 10 PhDs done locally in some IIT. Okay, it's a huge, it's a big research area. Okay, how to do it efficiently, optimally, less cost is kind of very hard problem to crack, and you can only approximate it. All right, so we will study some very simple scheduling algorithm, first come first serve, or last come first serve, or something like that. Largest job first or smallest job first and best fit, whatever. Okay, these are very trivial scheduling algorithms, but scheduling algorithms can be very overwhelming complex. Okay, because it's very hard problem to solve. All right, to summarize, we have studied a methodology called spin lock based approach, which is in this OS or hardware provides these instruction where testing and setting can be done atomically, and similar one is compare and swap. Okay, now we use this test and set instruction inside lock such that the value can be checked and new value can be set atomically. As a result of that, you know, the whole lock operation is atomic, and then anything that goes inside critical section also becomes in some sense atomic. Only one thread can enter that. Okay, spin lock, we have seen the first method, spin lock, is inefficient because, you know, all the processes, if the thread holding the lock moves out, all the other threads that are contending for the lock will get the time slot sometime or other and wait. The whole time slot will be wasted in waiting for lock to become free. So it's not easy. And another problem that we have not discussed is priority inversion. Now, if the busy waiting thread has higher priority than the thread holding the lock. Okay, so a thread is holding the lock, entered the critical section, moves out, and then thread that has higher priority will be busy waiting. Okay, So, and it may lead to unbounded waiting. Okay, so this is called priority inversion. Okay, so lock provides facility, but it also creates in, not having higher priority thread run earlier. Okay, because if thread moves out, it holds a lock. Second, higher priority thread, if it's scheduled in, because scheduler doesn't know all these things, right? Scheduler schedules in higher priority thread, it will wait, while it should get a chance over lower priority thread. Okay. Within OS, spin locks can be used because OS has a control and there's no threat of holding a lock for a longer period of time. Okay, and then we have looked at sleeping mutex approach, where we can use thread can use yield. It can yield. It has slightly better performance. Okay, all right. However, there's a problem of priority inversion that we have studied just now. Okay, and then there was a big failure. You know about this program? On Mars, rover was sent and failed. Okay, the reason for diagnosis was done, and the reason for failure is the priority inversion. That one we discussed just now. That higher priority jobs were not scheduled in by OS. That was in the rover robo. Okay. All right. Any question that comes to your mind? Okay, then thank you. See you tomorrow.